We are just left-wing Israelis or left-wing Palestinians. No, we were fighters. We fought each other. We did our best to kill and to harm each other physically. Today, we are family.
To watch a transformation from a woman who was so angry, who said if she met the person who killed her son, after 100 years she'd kill him, and to see that she's running dialogue meetings now. Shouldn't I be grateful for that?
Hi, I'm Shoma Chaudhury. Thanks for watching Inquiry. Israel and Palestine have just announced a ceasefire after a devastating cycle of violence. Typically, this is when one does the math, the number of rocket launches, airstrikes, the number of wounded and dead, and then the world moves on. But actually, this is the precise moment when one needs the most intense focus on the issue. How do those who are left alive move on? Is there a way forward from this horrible historical impasse? Rather than political leaders, I have two extraordinary speakers on the show today. Robi Damelin is an Israeli mother whose son David was shot by a Palestinian sniper. Bassam Aramin is a Palestinian father whose 10-year-old daughter Abir was shot by the Israeli border police as she was standing outside his school after a math exam. Bassam was also arrested when he was 17 for throwing stones and bombs at the Israeli police and spent 7 years in prison. Both Robi and Bassam could have continued the cycle of revenge and hate. Instead, they embarked on incredible and difficult journeys of peace and reconciliation. They started the Parents Circle and Combatants for Peace, two organizations where Palestinian and Israeli parents who have lost their children and former Israeli soldiers and Palestinian militants come together to seek a new path. Speaking to them will offer insights into the true cost of war and an alternate and more courageous path to security. Robi and Bassam, thank you very much for joining me on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Robi, I'd like to start with you. You lost your son. He was part of the Israeli reserve, and he was, in fact, not someone who really wanted to be serving. And he was shot by a Palestinian sniper. Could you talk to us a little bit about David? Because, we just speak of numbers. Could you individualize him for us and the shock of that loss and how you coped with that?
Well, David was a student at Tel Aviv University, and he was studying for his master's in the philosophy of education. And he was part of the peace movement, and he had signed the officers' letter to say that they would not serve in the occupied territories. And then he was called to go to reserves in the occupied territories. And that, it's terribly easy to judge people, but there's this quandary. You were brought up in this country, which, the army in a way is a kind of a holy cow, and refusing to go creates a lot of tension within your personal decision. And he came to see me and said, I don't know what to do. If I don't go, what happens to my students? He was teaching philosophy to kids who were going to be inducted into the army. And if I don't go, what happens to my soldiers? Because he was the officer. And if I do go, then I will treat people with dignity, and so will all my soldiers. So you see, I keep saying this. We don't know who the person is behind the gun, and we don't know what their motivations are. And we can't always label everybody with the same label. And so, I was dead against him going. I was filled with dread. But he went, and he was killed by a Palestinian sniper. And I always say that this man didn't kill David because he was David. If he'd known him, I can assure you that he would not have killed him. So he killed a uniform of an occupying army. So that's not such an easy thing to say, but that's actually the truth. When the soldiers came to tell me that he'd been killed, one of the first things I said is, you can't kill anybody in the name of my child. I have no idea where that came from, and I don't even know that I said it, but this is what people tell me.
You said that your experience in South Africa, in a way, trained you for this response. Can you help us understand that? Like, what about South Africa itself has been through such a violent history? What prepared you intrinsically to say that when you heard about your son's loss?
I don't really know. I mean, I know that when I grew up, in South Africa, and I was part of the anti-apartheid movement, and I come from a family where my uncle defended Mandela, and Gandhi walked with a cousin of mine from Durban to Johannesburg, and his name was Herman Kallenbach, the sort of distant cousin, and he gave Gandhi his first farm in South Africa. So I don't know. I suppose I come from that kind of family, and it's within me, and I always was interested in social justice, and I always tell the story of my first act of social justice because I want people to think what their first act was. I stole a horse with my friend because the horse was being beaten by the guy who used to deliver milk to our house in Johannesburg. And of course, my father came home and was totally horrified by the sight of a horse in the tennis court. And very shortly after that, I was sent to boarding school. I have always been part of social justice, but never with a complete dedication. But this is something that took over my life. Who would imagine that bereaved parents and families would actually stand on the same stage and talk in the same voice and condemn violence, talk about getting rid of the occupation? Because let me tell you that the occupation is the most pernicious thing that ever happened to Israel. Never mind, or do mind, of course I mind what happened to the Palestinians. But if you think about it, this was like 1967 is the date in many ways of the moral downfall of this country.
Bassam, I just want to come to you. Robi said in a way that because she came from a tradition of nonviolence and social justice, in some sense, she had a kind of grooming at that moment of extreme personal pain to draw on a political framework for herself. Interestingly, you had a different journey altogether. Your first moment of transformation, and you've had many, actually happened in the middle of a very severe beating that you were getting in prison. So can you share with our audience what happened? Why in a moment of even deeper humiliation and oppression that you could get the moral clarity that it was a moment of change for you?
Yeah, thank you. In fact, I can say my background as a Muslim, the religion. Because for me, religion is peace. Any religion, how we explain it, how we deal with it, how we act with it, it's something different. We need to reflect our religion in our behavior. So in fact, in jail, at that time, even 17, I don't know anything almost about the history. I don't know anything what happened in 1948 with the Palestinians. I have no idea about the Holocaust. I hear about the Holocaust, 6 million Jews, but it's lie. So I watch a movie about the Holocaust in jail. I always remember this movie because it's against humanity, against the human beings. I want to understand how those Nazis can kill 500 things a daily without seeing them as human beings. There is something wrong. In fact, it stayed with me many years, even until today. But before 10 years exactly from now, I make my master degree about the Holocaust in Bradford University in the UK. It's just to understand. I don't want to be a teacher. For myself, can we lose our humanity at all? And we can see each other as tools or monsters or just enemy? In fact, I discovered that, yes, it's very easy. If you lose your empathy with others, this is the end of your humanity. At the same time, I become a very close friends with my jailer. He was very extremist one, like most of them. We start to talk to prove that this land belongs to us. You are the occupiers. He believed that we are the settlers. And here we start. I said to him, if you convince me that we are settlers, I'll stop fighting. It means I really need to know who are the Palestinians. And this guy pushed me to educate myself. So I start to teach myself about ourselves first, the Palestinians. Then those Israelis or Jews or Zionists, why they come here, why they occupied us, their history, which is proof that education is the basic thing. If you know more, you act better. If you don't know, you always agree with yourself, with your narrative, with your history. You will be stuck in your pain. And this is what happened. We became a very close friends. Simply, he discovered that I am not a terrorist. The other side, I discovered that he's a very noble human being, and he's a victim exactly like me to this regime, to these circumstances. One specific date, the 1st of October 1987, we were 120 prisoners, 12 to 19, and the majority under 16, just kids. And that day, more than 100 soldiers enter to our section, take off our clothes, and they will beat you from both sides. And when it was my turn, I found myself shouting on them. I just cried. And this jailer come to his job by chance in that moment. Simply, he lay on me to protect me with his body. And he shout on them, don't touch him, he's sick. What I want to say that he saved my life.
So, Bassam, like you're saying that it took that courage to actually see a movie on the Holocaust and see that your oppressors were themselves victims and you all are victims of victims. And that's the great tragedy of the whole Israeli-Palestine conflict. Robi, so even after you had the mental and philosophical training to reach for peace, and to say no more killing in my son's name. When the sniper was caught and jailed, you wrote a letter to the family of the sniper seeking reconciliation, and they did not reply for 2.5 years. And when they did, you got a letter that was full of anger and hatred. How did you react to that? So you may talk of something philosophically, but in your personal life, it was a very, very difficult thing to encounter. What did that do to you? Did you lose your resolve for a while?
When I got the answer, I think when I got the answer, that's when I gave up being a victim. So that kind of freed me, because during the whole time that before I wrote the letter and after I wrote the letter, I was still contingent on what this man would decide to do. But the minute I got that letter from him, it was as if he said, okay. And I said, okay, because I felt sort of, how can I do this work if I'm not willing to walk the talk? So it was almost, he gave me a gift in a very strange manner. It's not complete yet. It doesn't matter how long it takes. There must be a completion. And of course, this is very much contingent on what the Israeli government will allow. So I got permission to go into the jail. And of course, I asked for Bassam to be the go-between between me and Saya. That's the name of the man who killed David. I couldn't think of anybody that I trusted more for this task than Bassam. Probably like my own family, maybe sometimes I think more so. He would be the ideal person, so we're waiting. And it will happen at some point, hopefully with the disappearance of certain people who lead our country, the powers that be.
So, Robi, again, I'll come to the larger political questions, and forgive me if I'm pressing any buttons which are painful for you. When you first saw your son's killer, how did you arrive at forgiveness? How does forgiveness and justice sit next to each other?
Everybody's has a different view on what forgiving is all about. For me, this is a very internal decision about integrity. It's very painful. After we went to South Africa, we made a film about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We went to meet people who actually had given evidence, both perpetrators and victims. And I went to look at what the meaning of forgiveness means. And there was this amazingly white Afrikaans woman. Now you would imagine, if you want to give people labels, as most people do, she would be part of the apartheid movement. But in fact, her daughter was killed by the black military movement in the African National Congress. And she'd gone to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and she said to the people who killed her daughter, I forgive you. And I wanted to know what she meant. And I went to meet her. And I said, what's your definition? And she said, for me, forgiving is giving up your just right to revenge. But much more important than that, extraordinarily speaking, I meet the man who sent the people to kill her daughter. And he and her have an NGO together today. And he said, by her forgiving me, she has released me from the prison of my inhumanity. And for me, that was the most extraordinary statement.
Bassam, just on that question of difficulty and forgiveness, I wanted to speak to you. Already you did something difficult, which was to be in an oppressed position, then you're beaten. You have a moment of empathy with your oppressor by watching a film on the Holocaust. You educate yourself, you make friends, and then you started Combatants for Peace. And 2 years after that, your little daughter, 10-year-old daughter, is shot outside school, and she's not even a combatant. How did you cope with that, Bassam? And how do you understand forgiveness? How did you decide to continue your work even after your daughter was taken away?
In fact, I started to work 2 years before I lost my daughter with, as you said, ex-Israeli soldiers and officers. And sometimes I wish I was hope. I'm going to say that for the first time, that David didn't have been killed and joined Combatants for Peace, because he was this is what he wanted to do, in fact. But what Robi explained, that he was in the wrong place, wrong time, with the wrong uniform. You know, if we talk about forgiveness, in the personal level, again, forgiveness, it's a deep value in Islam, in religion. It's a deep human value. But when something like this happened to you, when someone killed your 10 years old daughter in a conflict, she's not a hero, she's not a warrior, she'd never go to any army. You cannot say, forgive them. Oh, God, forgive them because they know not what they do. I am not Jesus. I am not the Prophet Muhammad who say, forgive them. Go, you are free, to the people who oppress him in Mecca. But then, luckily, we are human beings. We can think. To kill the rest of the Jewish on earth, you will never meet your daughter again. It's true. And the problem, it's nothing to do with your pain. It's 24 hours, forever, as long as you live. It will never heal, but how to do with this pain, how to manage this pain, to continue. There are people died immediately with their beloved one, not physically. There are people who become very angry, very brutal. They want to take revenge. They want all the world to suffer again. And there are people who make this tragedy as an opportunity to spread more light, more hope, more dialogue, and more bridge. And this is exactly what we did, me and Robi and many hundreds of others in the parent circle and in Palestine and Israel. So in one point, the killer of my daughter, I called him a victim because he was 18 and a half. And when I say a victim, maybe to his education, to his society, to his past, he wants to save the Jewish nation. I don't know. So for that, he's a victim. And I said once, after I talked to him in the court, after 3.5 years or 4 years, I don't want to take revenge because I don't take revenge from victims. I will forgive you, not because of you at all. It's because of myself, because I love my daughter very much, and because I have another 5 kids. They deserve to live in a different circumstances, which is a very difficult mission. As Robi said, it's always difficult because we are human beings. On the other hand, imagine if this killer or victim, someone kill him, I kill him. In the personal level, what can I gain? Nothing. But imagine if I know that he regrets this tragedy, this crime. He cannot sleep since 2007. This is my revenge. He's not a serial killer. He's not a monster. 2 months after the trial, after I talked to him, he already was a different human being. He cannot look at me and understand that, yes, we have hearts, we have tears. She was 10 years old. He understands that simply he committed a crime, which was enough. I will never go back to be a victim. The biggest tragedy, the Holocaust. The Palestinians didn't kill 6 million Israelis. And the Israelis didn't kill 6 million Palestinians. And there is a German ambassador in Tel Aviv. And there is an Israeli ambassador in Berlin. So we can do it. We have the right to exist, both of us. And we prove that we can live together. We can trust each other. And we are the example. I am and Robi, I am and Rami, tens of Palestinians and Israelis. We are just left-wing Israelis or left-wing Palestinians. No, we were fighters. We fought each other. We did our best to kill and to harm each other physically. Today, We are family because because we love our kids, because we consider our kids, our lives, more important than any holy land. But no one will occupy the other. No one will oppress the other. We need to be free and equal.
We'll keep coming back to your individual journeys, but Robi, I wanted to get a sense now of the work that you all are trying to do through the parent circle. Do you reach out to other political leaders, to global leaders, or is it more at the human transformation level?
It's very much grown grassroots level. Parents are always in this mode of loss. You know, it's like when I go to a wedding or when I go to, and I see David's friends and they have children and they always come to visit them, and it hurts. But on the other hand, I'm grateful for my life in many ways. Think of all the extraordinary opportunities I have had. Look, I'm talking to you, and you actually heard me in New York, and how small is this world of ours. And meeting Bushra, who was on stage with me. If you knew the story of Bushra, you would never believe. There's a story of transformation, of a person that I met who wanted to run away from me, who couldn't bear the fact that she was in the same room as an Israeli, who lost her son. He was killed also by a sniper. And who actually, once I showed her the picture of David, because she had a picture around her neck, there was this emotional breakthrough that she realized that we share the same pain. And I mean, she came to New York. That was the first time she ever got out of her village. And I took her to Central Park and we rode on the horses, and then I got her addicted to hamburgers. And then we spoke in that enormous, in Lincoln Center. Can you imagine what that was for her? And all the audience stood up because she told her truth. So how can I not be grateful for being a catalyst in somebody's life like that? And she brought her whole family now to the parent circle. And her kids think I'm their grandmother, which is really nice. So, you know, there are wonderful, wonderful things with all this pain that also keep me going. To watch a transformation from a woman who was so angry, who said if she met the person who killed her son, after 100 years, she'd kill him. And to see that she's running dialogue meetings now. Shouldn't I be grateful for that? One of the most important projects that we do, which is a parallel narrative project. And by the way, this could be imported into India. How do you see history through the human eye? They go to, for instance, to the Holocaust Museum. If you do not understand the history of the Jewish people and the DNA of fear, and if you know what fear leads to, you will never understand the behavior of the Israelis. And then we go to a village which was once a Palestinian village before 1948, before the declaration of the State of Israel. And today it is just ruins. It started with 2 members from our group who came from that village. And when we got there, this mother looked down and she couldn't find anything, but she found the well that she drew water out of as a child. And for her, that was so extraordinary. And for us, that was a way to create empathy for a woman who's walking around with the key to a door which will never open again. And all of this work that we are doing is to create empathy for the other, even if you don't agree with them. Then we have within the framework of this course, lectures by a Palestinian and Israeli historian. And each one tells the milestones of our history through their eyes. How does each side see that? And what is so amazing is a completely different story with the same facts, which is what is actually happening now. Because if you watch your news and the Palestinian watch their news, it's like two different worlds. Because of lack of respect, we don't bother to find out about the other person's culture or about how they see their world. And so you can't go blundering into a room to negotiate if you have no idea how the other person is feeling.
Bassam, you're both speaking as parents, but the other aspect of your work really interests me, which is also of former Palestinian militants and the Israeli former soldiers. Describe to me the first few meetings and how has it changed? Can you help me understand the graph of that journey?
Yeah, in fact, the first meeting took place in the end of 2004, the beginning of 2005, by 4 Palestinians, ex-prisoners, as I said, and 7 ex-Israeli officers, It was the most difficult meeting for each one of us, and especially for me, from my point of view. I start to test my loyalty to myself, to my suffering, to my people. I'm going to meet those killers, those occupiers, those criminals, and you need to make an effort even to smile and to shake hands. It's very difficult. And we can see the fear in their eyes. It's the first time they are coming to meet ex-Palestinian terrorists or killers without their weapons, without their units or tanks. So it was difficult. I think everything they are going to say is just lying. And we thought that they come to catch us. They are from the Israeli Shabak. They think we are belong to Hamas and we are going to kidnap them and kill them. In this atmosphere, imagine when we start to talk, something strange happened. One of them said, the first time without my gun, I feel more safe. I never forget that. I feel more safe, which is true. From my side, because we have no arms and we come with a goodwill, we scared, it's okay. When we talk to each other, we need to start to trust each other. But they are not friends, they are not relatives, we are enemies. In the end of this meeting, we agreed to make another meeting in 2 weeks. So every side will think about the other side. And I believe in this meeting, the second meeting, which also take around 5 hours to 4 hours, we start to understand that we can work together. For us, they are against the occupation. That's it. This is the common ground. This is the common enemy. Because we claim if there is no occupation, we don't need to kill each other. Strange thing for me in the beginning, everyone who's used to serve in the occupied territories, after his military service, he went to India. And in India, they changed their mind. And when they come here, they refuse to, as I said, to serve. So I suggest to bring all the Israeli army to India for 2 weeks or 1 month. When they come back here, they will refuse, and that's it. And if any Palestinian attack them after that, we will send them to New Delhi again, because something, in fact, I didn't understand really. There's something in India. What's this thing?
I'm sure the Indian audience will really be intrigued to hear this. So what are you saying, that really when you're saying send the Israeli army to India and they will go back and not want to fight, what
Yeah,
was the transformation that happened in India?
No, it was like a joke, but it means I didn't understand why 2019. I went to India for 2 weeks for a speaking tour. We go to 10 cities. There's something spiritual. When we talk about war, sometimes you kill civilians, you kill innocent people, and you are human beings. When you go to live in a normal situation, this will come back to you again and again. After this long history of suffering in India, and to understand that words and actions, non-violence actions, can win over the greatest kingdom.
You spoke in the beginning, Robi, about the fact that a lot of this work is to save Israel for itself, that is a kind of moral decline of Israel to be occupying Palestinian land as they are. Can you explain this concept that you're trying to do this work to actually save Israel even more than to save Palestinians?
Well, I think it's an equal wanting to save. I think that people don't realize what has happened to this country. You cannot occupy another people for so many years and imagine that it will not affect your nation. Can you imagine what it is for a kid of 18, goes off to the army, standing there with a gun, has power and no wisdom, and can make decisions far beyond his years, and has the license to be aggressive? So would he not bring that back into our society? We have more domestic violence, more violence in schools, more violence on the streets than we've ever had before. You cannot tell me that this is not partially a result of an occupation. And so I think that it's also killing the moral fiber of my country. I see it when we go into schools. We go into schools together, Palestinians and Israelis, and you listen to these kids and you see that they have been brainwashed into a much more right-wing attitude without ever meeting a Palestinian in their lives, I would say to them, the cutoff here is so drastic that I would say to the kids in a class, how many of you have ever met a Palestinian before? I mean, they may have bought hummus from somebody. It'll be nobody. Who speaks Arabic? Maybe two in the class because their granny came from the Levant. And who's been overseas? 80% of the class. But they don't know their immediate neighbor. So for them, this is a major shock to hear a narrative of a Palestinian that isn't based on what they see on TV or what their parents told them. They suddenly meet a human being. They don't even know, these 17-year-olds, where the occupied territories are. For me, settler kids are abused. And each generation becomes more abusive because you can't bring up your child in that area and imagine that they will not be affected. And so what happens is it's like abused children become abusers, and each generation gets worse. The joint ceremony that we do on Memorial Day for soldiers, already that's a very controversial thing. And many, many other parents who've lost soldiers do not agree with us having Palestinian and Israeli narratives together. People who don't agree with us, parents and also people who are encouraged by very right-wing groups, come to demonstrate against us, throw bags of urine at us and scream and shout and carry on and drape themselves in flag. They are quite violent. It's quite frightening, actually. But you can't expect everybody to agree with you. And by the way, I would never, ever tell another parent who lost a child how they should commemorate their child. But I would expect the same courtesy. And it's not always the parents that are demonstrating against us. It's this right-wing groups of kids who have no idea what they're doing or understand what the pain is and calling us traitors. I mean, I paid a really high price not to be called a traitor. If you looked at what happened, all this uprising, these kids were like 16, 17, 18. When you've got no hope, why do you care? This war is just a mirror image of 2014, only with more sophisticated weapons. And who are the victims of this war? The children. Look at the children in Gaza. They have nowhere to run. They have no hope. And then look at the children in the villages of Sderot and all the little kibbutzim and places around there who are wetting their beds at the age of 12 through the trauma of this. So what I wish for is not something so grandiose. I want those children to be safe. I don't want them to grow up with a hatred for the other. I want them to meet each other on a ground which is safe.
Bassam, I read recently someone saying this, that when the ceasefire is over, like I've been saying, the global attention will move away. But there was a very moving piece I read where it said just the passage of time itself feels violent, in this land. So can you invoke for our audience the experience of living in the West Bank and in Gaza? What is the day-to-day lived experience of that?
I wish I can bring West Bank and Gaza to you to see it. It's very difficult. Simply imagine that if you want to leave your home, it's a big deal. You need to make plans. It's not a normal. You need to think that always you are followed with the security forces. You are wanted. If anyone knocked at your door and you don't expect maybe your neighbor, you will think that those are the Shabak or the soldiers they come to, or the police. I know this mentality when I make my dissertation. You need to feel fear all the time. It's not freedom of movement at all. There is no safe place. Abir were in Anata, nothing in that day, no demonstrations, no intifada, no war. And she get killed. Gaza is different than the West Bank. Inside Gaza, there is no Israeli soldiers. Yes, it's the biggest jail on earth with 2 million people. Israel control everything, the sea, the sky, and the borders. In the West Bank, they are among us all the time, 24 hours. And in spite of that, what the Palestinians know, the Israeli people, through their representative, which is the Israeli soldiers, the Israeli police, and the Israeli very extremist settlers. Those are the Israelis that they know. So imagine you don't have a freedom of movement, a freedom of thinking even. You cannot think, you want to be secure all the time, and at the same time, you cannot keep silence. Because in my eyes, silence and violence lead to the same result. 6 million Jews have been slaughtered in Germany and Europe because they keep silence and the world keeps silence. So it's a big sin to keep silence about anything in the world. It's a call for to take sides, to be with justice, humanity, liberation, democracy, equality, and against occupation and humiliation and oppression. When we talk about reconciliation, there is no reconciliation under the occupation. It doesn't work. We talk after we have peace process. We need to include reconciliation, not to repeat the past. The other side cannot even see us. You know, enemy in general have no human face until you meet someone in the personal level. But again, they are victims to the same circumstances, to the leaders. But people who elect such a very radical leaders, they are not very innocent. They need to change to elect a brave leader who don't remind them 5 times a day with their atrocities in the past. One of the tools to hide the humanity of the other side, their civilization, is to hide them at all. It's not to talk to them. For that, we have a 10 meters long separation wall to prevent the Israelis to see with their own eyes what happened by their sons and daughters as soldiers in the occupied territories.
So interesting, because we have the summer camp, for instance, with these kids. When they first come, it's like a mini version of the adults. You know, they sit in separate places. They look exactly the same because they wear the same trainers, the same music, they like all that stuff, till they suddenly discover each other. And then they don't want to go home after the end of the summer camp because it's a sense of relief. You know, the sense of relief to know that the person on the other side is exactly like you and wants the same things. They want to get up in the morning. They want to go to school. They don't want to be in danger. They don't want their mother phoning them 50 times a day to find out if they're okay. And the same for Israelis. You know, it's like every time, if my grandson isn't somewhere where he's supposed to be, my reactions are totally outblown. I mean, they have nothing to do with reality, because that's what it's like to live in an insecure place. People, you know that my oldest grandson had to go to the army. So he has a bad back. So he can't be in a fighting unit. So I'm so delighted that he can't be in a fighting unit. He can be like a clerk somewhere. And just think about how mad that is, that the grandmother is happy that her grandson got a very bad back so that he can't go to the army. Just think that this is the way the mothers and the nation thinks.
So, Robi, you know, help us understand from a perspective of the Israeli people, not through your personal perspective, that how does a people that has come out of such a history of oppression and victimization at others' hands end up in a position where they are perpetrating that violence themselves? What is the psyche shift that has allowed Israel to participate in violence on others?
You know, this is a really difficult question because you can't generalize. There are people with compassion who have to go to the army, who find themselves in these terrible positions of having to deal with civilians. There are people from all over the world here. Some of them have not come from places where they have been oppressed. But very often, I think the people who are abused become worse abusers. If you think about fear, I think fear is what really creates this possibility of becoming violent. Because when you fear somebody, what happens is that you then start to hate them. And then the violence happens. But it's so difficult to generalize because there's so many different aspects of this nation who happen all to be Jewish, but they come from such different environments. I suppose you could see yourself as a victim if you just see your own side of the story. Say, I sat here and spoke to you and said, yes, well, they shot hundreds of rockets over my house in Jaffa, and the Palestinian Israelis went and burnt cars downstairs. But I could also think about what's the other side and put myself into their shoes. But that's not what everybody does. If I tell you every morning, that your life is in danger and you better just be careful, you're going to become very fearful and very hateful.
So, Bassam, what about you? Do you see any hope, any change since you started this work?
It's not a matter of hope, it's a fact, of course. We're not going to kill each other forever. One day we will have peace agreement, we will live in peace. It's not written anywhere that we're going to kill each other forever. For our politicians, for the occupiers, for the rest of the world, how much blood we need to achieve the same agreement. I can see a big change in the international opinion in general, in the Biden administration, which is new voices for the first time, to start to see the Palestinians as human beings. They deserve equal rights to live in peace and security as the Israelis. In the end, we will make the same agreement. So let us make it now.
You can't give up hope, because hope is the most important equation in the peace process. Without it, you'll never have peace.
Thank you very much, both of you. It's been a real honor speaking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.